Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Ella and welcome. On my channel we talk about lots of creepy things, murders, missing people, and today we're going to be talking about possibly one of the most creepiest, weirdest disappearance slash deaths ever. As you can tell by the title, today we're going to be talking about Elisa Lam. So if you have Netflix, if you have social media, you've probably heard of Elisa Lam. A few weeks ago, Netflix released its 4-part documentary series called Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, and it is all about the disappearance and death of Elisa Lam. I just put a bunch of facts together and I'm going to tell you guys them so you can understand a little better her case. If you haven't watched the Netflix thing yet, I definitely recommend watching that after this video because it gives a lot more in-depth detail and it gives a lot more of the theories and possibilities, and it just covers a lot more than what I can talk about in a 20 to 30 minute video. So if you guys are interested in the Elisa Lam case, keep watching and leave a like and subscribe and turn on post notifications so you can see every time I post a video. And I don't want to talk too much longer, so let's get into the case. Elisa Lam was born to David and Yenna Lam on April 30th, 1991 in Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada. She had a sister named Sarah who she was pretty close to, and her parents were immigrants from Hong Kong, so she was a first-generation Canadian. She was 21 years old and she was attending the University of British Columbia. So she was a pretty normal person. Now, what kind of set her apart from this normal life was that she did have bipolar disorder and depression, and it was something that she really had to work to overcome daily. Her cases of these mental illnesses were pretty severe, but she really liked to use Tumblr to kind of post her thoughts, and she used it almost as more of a journal than social media. She liked to put everything out there and just share it with the world so that hopefully someone could connect with her. So Elisa really wanted to travel the world. She really wanted to find something bigger than what she had at home in Canada, and she just wanted to see things like a lot of young people do. To put this dream into action, she decided to plan a trip to California. So that's what she did. She went to California. She spent a few days going through San Diego. She posted on social media actually at the San Diego Zoo, and shortly after this, on January 26th, she arrived in Los Angeles and she checked into the Cecil Hotel. To understand her case, you need to understand the dynamic of the Cecil Hotel. The Cecil Hotel is located on something called Skid Row. Skid Row covers about 50 blocks and is known for its excessive drug use and crime. It's home to 4,000 to 8,000 homeless people. So this is one of the poorest, most dangerous places in the state. Skid Row became an unofficial containment area in 1976, which basically means it was an area where they would drop homeless people off, and they tried to contain them all to this area to keep, you know, the poor area just that area. Skid Row is in downtown LA, and downtown LA can be really deceiving to young tourists, or any tourists really, because LA is made out to be this magical place, but really that's only certain parts of LA. People don't realize that there are places like Skid Row, so they think they're just going to stay in this nice hotel in LA in a very safe place, when really they're in possibly one of the most dangerous places in America. So the Cecil Hotel is located right in Skid Row. A lot of homeless people who lived on Skid Row were long-term tenants in the Cecil, so they would stay there for a period of weeks or months just because, you know, they could get off the streets for a little while. But because of this, you know, they really brought the danger of the streets into the hotel. So along with all this danger and crime, the Cecil had a really dark history. Towards the beginning of its opening, there were so many suicides at the Cecil that it actually became nicknamed the Suicide, and up to 12 recorded suicides happened there. Like I said, it was in a dangerous area, so there was a lot of drug dealers staying there. There were a lot of prostitutes staying there. There was a lot of dangerous activity brought in from the streets into the Cecil. A lot of murders had even taken place there. The most famous probably being Goldie Osgood, and I won't go too much into that, but basically she was someone who was a long-term tenant in the hotel. Everyone kind of knew her, and she was stabbed in her room. There were even serial killers that had connections to the Cecil. Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, had connections to the Cecil. It's reported that he stayed there and possibly even killed some of his victims there, and he had a large presence on Skid Row. It's just rumors of him being actually in the hotel, but he did have a presence around the hotel. Another serial killer, Jack Unterweger, stayed at the hotel and murdered at least 3 people in his time at the hotel, so it was a really, really dark place. And the other thing about this hotel, to kind of understand the vibe of where Elisa really was, it's not a luxury hotel. It was mostly homeless people and tourists. It was not an expensive hotel. You kind of had to understand that you were in danger if you were there. But unfortunately, that's not something that a lot of tourists knew when they did go there, and that goes for Elisa too. She wasn't aware of all of the danger around her. So anyway, she was in a room with a few other girls on the 5th floor, and she actually had to be moved from this room to a different room because the other roommates were complaining of weird behavior from her. I don't know exactly what this weird behavior was, but it says in the Netflix documentary that, you know, she was writing notes to people, like creepy notes, and just being like disruptive and overall weird. So they complained and they moved her to another room. And like I said, Elisa did have bipolar disorder and depression, but according to her family, she never had any history of suicidal thoughts or suicide attempts, so they thought this was okay for her to be going off on her own. They knew this was something she had to live with, but it had never really been so much of a problem that she couldn't live. So even though her parents were okay with her going on this trip, they asked her to check in with them every day just to make sure everything was fine. So up until a few days in her trip, that's what she did. She called them every day, told them she was fine, and that just made them feel more comfortable with Elisa being in another country. So on February 1st, 2013, the day Elisa was supposed to check out of the Cecil Hotel, her parents didn't receive a call from her, and they thought this was really weird, so they called the LAPD and reported her as missing. Her parents also flew to LA to help look for her. So at first, LAPD searched parts of the hotel because they couldn't search every room unless they had a valid reason to, but eventually they were able to search every room and nothing was found throughout the whole hotel. So at this point in her case, flyers were made and posters were put up, just anything to help bring attention to her case. So this is probably one of the most important parts of the case. On February 15th, the LAPD released some security footage from inside of the elevator at the Cecil Hotel, and Elisa is in the footage. And this happens to be the last time she was ever seen on footage or in person. So in the footage, she's acting super weird. She's like going in the elevator, pressing all of the buttons, and she's like looking out the door as if there's someone out there, or she thinks there's someone out there. And then it almost seems like she's hiding in the corner. And then she steps outside and you can see that she's moving her arms really weirdly, and it's just really weird behavior. The doors of the elevator aren't closing, and it seems like she like gave up trying to get in the elevator and she ends up walking away. So in the first few days that this footage was released, it got millions of views. People were like obsessed with it. They wanted to know what happened to her, and there were so many theories based on this footage. You know, people thought there was someone attacking her or following her based on the way she was looking out the door, or it seemed like she was trying to get away from someone. Other people thought she was on some kind of drug, which is why she's moving her arms so weirdly. And other people even suggested that there was some kind of paranormal activity going on, almost like she was possessed in a way. But when the public learned of her bipolar disorder, the main theory really became that this was a psychotic episode. That would explain the arm movements, that would explain why it seems like she's hiding from someone. But of course people still had all of these other theories. Around this time, people started to accuse the hotel of tampering with the footage. And this is because the timestamp in the corner looks blurry and it seems as if the video is slowed down. It also seems like there might be a part cut out, which people started to think that there was someone else in the video and that the hotel or maybe even the police were trying to cover it up. But no one has ever confessed to editing the footage. The hotel strongly claims that they did not. So the search for Elisa went on for 19 days. So she was missing for all of this time, and since there was no footage of her leaving the hotel, everyone kind of thought she had to be in there, or someone had to have killed her in there and taken her out. So there wasn't really much to go off of besides those theories from the elevator footage. So guests at the hotel started complaining about a really low water pressure and that the taste was a little weird. And some guests even claimed that it was like brown or black water. So the hotel obviously went to look into this complaint, and they sent an employee and they sent an employee up to the roof to look in the water tank to see what was wrong. When they opened the water tank, they saw Elisa floating at the top of it, and her clothes were sunken to the bottom. And so the whole time her body was in this water tank, people were showering with it, brushing their teeth, and even drinking it. So for most of the guests, they were pretty traumatized by this, and you know, it was another thing to kind of add to the list of the bad reputation of the Cecil. So obviously the next step was for them to drain the water and remove her body, and then now the question was, from the elevator footage, how did she make it to the roof, and why was she in the water tank? And the elevator footage was really the only clues to point us in the direction of how she got there. So the doors and elevators to the roof were supposedly locked and only accessible to employees, but the way she could have gone up there is the fire escape. There was a lot of confusion on how she ended up here, because for her to do it on her own, for her to get in that water tank on her own, it would have been really difficult. These were 4 by 8 foot water tanks, so they weren't small, and they were like propped up on these cement blocks. So they were really high in the air, and supposedly employees usually had to climb ladders to look into it. So for her to get in there, it would have been hard on her own. The other weird thing was that when Elisa was found, the lid to the water tank was closed. So that meant if she had gotten in there by herself, she would have had to close the lid behind her, which again, it would have been hard but not impossible. Obviously, what investigators were trying to figure out at this point was, how did she get in this water tank? There were so many possibilities: suicide, accident, murder. There was even sexual assault as an option here because her clothes were off. And there was just so many possibilities of what could have happened to her. So because of all of the weird things surrounding her case and just the weirdness of the hotel, her case became one of the most popular on social media and on the internet. And web sleuths, or people who look into these cases on the internet, they became like obsessed with her case. A lot of them followed it from the time the elevator footage was released up until the time she was found dead. So, you know, they really were invested in this case and they wanted to find out what happened. So even though her case had so many different theories and possibilities already, now you had all of these just random people who were investigating her case, all of their theories, all of their ideas being thrown into the mix. So it was kind of hard to separate rumor from fact, because there were just so many different ideas and people looking at this case. So I think ultimately that made it even harder for the LAPD to come to a conclusion of what happened to her. One of the most popular theories among the web sleuths is that there was some kind of pact or deal made between the hotel and LAPD to kind of frame Elisa's death as an accident when really it was something else. So LAPD and the general manager of the Cecil at the time, Amy Price, claim that they had nothing to do with this. It's just the web sleuths chasing something that isn't real, and they are claiming that it was an accident. The hotel really, at this point, was, you know, being attacked. People thought the hotel had done this, or they were trying to cover it up. A lot of people thought the general manager knew exactly what happened to Elisa and just wasn't telling anyone. But she claims over and over that the hotel had nothing to do with this. The hotel wasn't responsible. How were they supposed to stop someone from climbing onto the fire escape? So then, to add in another element, which makes it even more interesting, the web sleuths found this guy named Morbid. That was his stage name, and he is a musician, and his thing is kind of making music about death. That's what he likes to do. And there were so many coincidences to Elisa Lam that they started to accuse this guy of murder. He was in the Cecil around the time of Elisa's disappearance, and he had released some songs and music videos that revolved around murder shortly after Elisa was murdered. So, you know, the web sleuths were thinking that this guy was just dropping little hints and clues in his music and through his social media, trying to say, like, I killed Elisa. So they actually started reaching out to him through Facebook and YouTube and social media, and they started sending him messages accusing him of killing Elisa. He was looked into and he had nothing to do with it, but that just shows how much these web sleuths really can throw things off path when, you know, they're trying to help by giving their ideas and theories on this, but it can throw the case onto a whole nother path. So finally, on February 21st, 2013, LAPD ruled Elisa Lam's death an accident with bipolar disorder as a significant factor. So basically what this meant was they were saying that Elisa did get into that water tank on her own, but it wasn't a suicide, it was an accident. And the main reason that she would have gotten into that water tank was because of her bipolar disorder. So the reason they kind of came to this conclusion was a few days prior, they learned from Elisa's sister that she had a history of not taking her bipolar disorder medication. She actually was known to have these episodes when she wasn't taking her meds, and her sister said she would say someone was like trying to attack her, and it was like she was hiding from something, and so she would have these like extreme psychotic episodes, and ultimately LAPD decided that this is what that was. And to me it makes sense, because there's just no way to explain the elevator footage, in my opinion, other than a psychotic episode. You know, why would someone go into an elevator pressing all the buttons and moving their arms like that? If she wasn't moving her arms, I could maybe get behind the idea that it was an attacker, but like, why would she be doing that with her arms? In her autopsy, they also found out that she wasn't on any drugs besides her medication that she was supposed to be on, but when they found her pill bottles, she was undertaking her medication. She had a lot more left than she should have, so they kind of came to the conclusion that, you know, she was off her meds, and that's why this happened to her. And that would also explain the weird behavior that the other guests had complained about earlier. So in my opinion, what they ruled her death makes sense to me. So the September following Elisa's death, her parents filed a wrongful death suit against the Cecil Hotel, claiming that they didn't do enough to prevent her getting up to the roof and into the water tank. But the suit was dropped because, you know, the hotel couldn't really do anything. They had all of the doors locked. She went out to the fire escape and went up there. They can't lock the fire escapes. So the suit was dropped, and the hotel isn't held responsible by the law for Elisa's death. So that's pretty much the end of Elisa's case. The beginning of her case, it was like there was so much to go off of, and there were so many different possibilities and things to look into, but once they found her dead, like, there wasn't much anymore. There were really no leads, and it was like the only possibility that really made sense logically is the bipolar disorder, and it was a psychotic episode. Unless you do believe what LAPD said, her case can't really be solved. There's no way that we'll ever be able to tell how she got up there and why she ended up in the water tank. It's really kind of sad how her case ended. It was a case with so much in it, and so many people were looking into it hoping that she would be found. When she was found dead, it was like they were all kind of let down. And I think a lot of the web sleuths too don't want to accept the fact that it's an accident. They want to keep looking into it and find something more interesting than an accident, you know? But if we think about it logically, in my opinion at least, it was an accident, and that's how she ended up there. So the following years after her death, a lot of TV shows were based off of her case. Her case is really one of the most famous and most interesting among the internet and pop culture. How to Get Away with Murder and American Horror Story actually had seasons and episodes based off of Elisa's case. The Cecil Hotel today is really different than it was when Elisa was there. It was remodeled a few times to try to get rid of the crime and the bad reputation that it used to have. Currently the hotel is not opened, but it is scheduled to reopen in the near future, rebranded completely. The Cecil Hotel is closed. It was sold to be rebranded and to be opened again as a better hotel. So that is pretty much all I have for this case. If you want more facts and more details and alternate endings to Elisa's story, go watch the Netflix documentary series. It is so good. They explain it in such an interesting way. They really make you believe each possibility for a while. So I really liked it, and I hope you guys liked this video. I hope you'll go watch the Netflix documentary, and let me know what you personally believe what happened to Elisa Lam in the comments, because I love hearing what you guys think happened to all of these people. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you can see every time I post a video like this. I post missing people cases all the time, murder cases all the time. So if you liked this case, you will like my other content. So thank you guys again so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!